Hello everyone. I'm Ellen from Be So Creative, and this is our Serger Club, our very first class called the Decorative Pillow. We did already meet on Saturday, and we had a wonderful time, a really fun class, and I think everybody had a good time, but we learned some interesting things too. One of the things we learned is that we may have bit off a little bit too ambitious of a project for the very first time because nobody completely got finished with their project. I think most of us, some people got about maybe halfway through. I mean, we've got their top of their pillow decorated and we didn't even get to the zipper yet or sewing it together. So if you haven't started yours yet, you're not that far behind. But I did come home and kind of rethink what happened on the class, and I realized that, of course, with the first one, you just never know where people are at, where the class is going to be at, and how familiar the students are going to be with their sergers. Well, as it turned out, many of us in the class were kind of new to the serger, and we're still getting to know what their serger does and how to get it set up. And that is okay. We're going to gear this towards you and what you need. So I have talked to Marcia here, and we've decided that I'm going to add some extra help here on this video. Some things that I didn't talk about during the actual class, I've added here, so those of you that were at class will get a little bit of extra information watching the video today. Then next month in February, Marcia is going to be your teacher, and she's going to take you through the rolled edge. And I believe you're going to do some napkins. So you'll learn to set up for a rolled edge. And she's also going to slow down a little bit and give you some serger basics, a little bit more serger orientation. So you hopefully won't feel like you're behind, and a little bit more information. Then in March, we're going to do Serger Decorative Pillow Part 2. And that way, those of you that didn't get finished with your decorative pillow by that time can finish it up and have another chance, another day to get to the next part of the pillow, which has a lot of challenges to it too, because we're going to put in a zipper, sew up the sides, and even make the tassels. And I hope that we can finish all of that up and do that in March. So fear not. If you felt like you got left behind, we're going to make sure that everybody can complete this project and feels comfortable. So I did show you in class a little bit about how you can vary your pillow. So here are some pictures of some different pin-tucked pillows. And you can see that in our example, I have a crosshatch pattern, a diamond pattern, but you can do yours as just parallel lines here, parallel lines this way. I love the way they did a two-tone on this one. Squiggly wiggly lines and even more squiggly wiggly lines. I don't recommend something this elaborate with the heavy thread that we're going to be using, but any of these others, just to give you some ideas for how you can use this technique in the future and do lots of other things with it. We spent really the whole class time on this 2-thread flat lock stitch. And so I'm going to go into more detail today about how to set your serger up for that 2-thread flat lock. But also in this pillow, we will be using the 3-thread overlock seam. We will be installing an invisible zipper, and we will be using the rolled edge setting to make the tassels for the side. So here are the materials that you need. And I think almost everybody bought the kit. So everything is in the kit that you need except for this fancy, beautiful decorative thread. We didn't have you buy that. The idea was for you to borrow from us at class and find a color or something that you liked and try it out. So hopefully those of you who weren't able to make it into the store can find some pretty decorative thread. It can be as heavy as 6 weight, 12 weight works nice. You can even just use any thread that you have. You don't have to worry about how heavy it is because it's going into the looper. It doesn't have to go through the eye of the needle. But that way you can get the color and the look that you like. So the first step, if you bought a kit, it's already been done for you. We did fuse interfacing to the wrong side of our pillow top so that we would have a little bit of extra body for the stitches to hold on to and to sit up nicely on. So now it's time to set up your serger for a 2-thread flat lock narrow stitch. And here's where it gets tricky, because every serger is going to have slightly different look to it, slightly different setup instructions. And it's just up to you to get to know your serger, get to know how to read your instructions and figure out how to set up your serger. But here's some basic concepts that are true for every serger. I always think of setting up a serger as 3 steps. First, I always address my needle position. Which needles do I need in there? If you have a basic overlock machine, you probably have room for 2 needles, a left and a right. Or on my baby lock, it's a 02 and an 01. So figure out on your machine where your right needle goes and your left needle goes. If your machine also does a cover or a chain stitch, then you have 3 extra needles and they are protruding out on the front of your other 2 overlock needles. And so they will probably be labeled C1, C2, and C3, or maybe C left, C right, and C middle, or C center. Those are for your cover stitches. So again, if you don't have cover stitch on your machine, don't panic. What happened to my other needles? Maybe your machine doesn't accommodate those 3 extra needles, but you can still make the pillow with the 2 needle machine. So the very first thing I do when I'm getting ready to do new stitch is I set my needle up according to my machine's instructions. And for the flat lock, you can see right here in our chart, this is the chart that came with my machine. Yours will look different. Here's my needle chart, and I'm not going to use C1, C2, or C3 or overlock 1, but I am going to use overlock 2. That's the right needle. So the first thing I do is get my needle in my machine. Part 2 is setting up the hardware and settings on the serger. It's really the hardware and settings that make the stitch and that make the stitch unique. And so that's kind of lengthy. So on mine here, you can see that the first thing it tells me is how to set my length, how to set my width. On mine, I have to set my stitch selector knob. If you don't have a machine, if your machine has individual knobs here, 4 different knobs or 4 different dials where you are able to set the tension yourself on these 4 slots, you won't have a stitch selector. Instead, you will have 4 categories, 1, 2, 3, 4, and it'll show you which number to set your dial for each one of those slots in your machine. 2 of them will be for your left, right needle, and 2 of them will be for your lower looper and upper loop. I'll show you an example of that in just a moment. Then if your machine does a wave stitch, you might do a wave selector here. Here you have it set to overlock. It doesn't matter what your chain needle, if you have a chain feature, you don't have to worry about adjusting it. So let me go, I want to go ahead here's another chart. This is a chart on my Bernina machine. And you may have a chart that looks something like this that comes with your machine. So here again are my needle positions, left, center, and right. Those are for my cover stitch. Here's my left and right overlock needle. It tells me to set my left needle at a 4 tension and my right needle at a 4 tension. Then it tells me to put my upper looper at a 4 or 5.8 or whatever stitch you're doing. We're doing this stitch right here, 2-thread flat lock right needle. And so I have to set, I don't have a left needle. So you can see there's no setting for it. I only have a right needle. So I have to set that right needle at a 3. And that's if you have dials on your machine. If you don't have dials, then you use the stitch selector button. And then it tells me what to set the lower looper at. Set it at a 7. There's nothing for upper looper. Why not? Because this stitch doesn't use an upper looper. And we're going to talk more about that. So let me go back to the baby lock side first. So here is what the threading chart looks like for my ovation. And this is also similar to your, if you have a triumph or an accolade or one of those higher end, I guess you'd say, upper level baby locks. So you can see I have no dials to show me where to turn here. Instead, I have a stitch selector, and that's right here, and I select that on a B. And now I have to look very carefully at where my threads go. So the lower looper is going to be the same for everybody. Everybody's going to use lower looper thread over here. But if you have a thread chart that looks like this, notice that my needle thread, usually we expect the needle thread to be here and here, but it's not. It's here in this slot, and that's very important because remember, these slots, the tension are preset in these types of machines. So make sure your needle thread ends up going through there, right? And we'll talk more about threading in a moment. But right now we're setting up. So everybody now pay attention to this setting right here. This is something that happens in the upper looper. So for this kind of stitch, there is no upper looper thread. We are not even using the upper looper. It's only a 2-thread stitch. So one thread is the needle, the other thread is the lower looper. There's nothing in the upper looper. So what happens on sergers is that the upper looper has an eye that you thread the thread through, and you're probably, if you manually thread your machine, you know that you follow the pathway for the upper looper, and then the last thing you do is put it through that little eye, that little hook that comes over, you string it through the eye. If there is no thread to go through the eye of that little looper, the machine gets confused. The lower looper doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have anything there to loop to. So what you have to do is you have to change or convert your upper looper. Basically, you have to fill that little eye with something so that the machine is not expecting there to be thread there, is the way I explain it. So let's look at the chart here on my Bernina. You see right here when I get to this column, upper looper converter, I have to find something that looks like that. And that's what has to be attached to my machine in order to convert the upper looper in order to do this stitch. Back here on the baby lock, I have a different look. It says subsidiary looper. I have a little thing to flip over. So I made a video here to show you all a little bit more about how this works. So let's watch the video.
This is the Baby Lock Ovation. It's very much like the Baby Lock Triumph. And you can see this part right here is the part that's moving up and down. This is your upper looper. And right here, I pull this little wire out and over, and now I am engaging the upper looper to work like normal. This is when you actually use upper looper thread, you're going to have it like this. On stitches that you don't use upper looper thread, such as the flat lock seam that we've been doing, you need to fill this little hole in here with something besides thread so that the lower looper won't get confused. So you just snap this piece over, and this tiny little wire right here goes through the back of it, and it will fit in there very snugly. And now this upper looper hole is filled, and now the lower looper won't be confused. It won't be expecting thread to come out of there. Now this is my Bernina. It's the 1300 DC. So if you have a slightly older Bernina like this, Bernina Serger, you can see that this is my upper looper, and again it goes up and down. And now, in order to fill in the little hole there, if I have a stitch like the flat lock stitch that does not need upper looper thread, I need to fill that little hole in. So that is located right down here, and I call it a little hat. It looks like a little hat. And you can see there's a little hole right there, down at the bottom of that shaft. And that little hole aligns with this little button right there. And once you get this set on and snapped in that little hole, take this wire here and move it to the back so it's back behind and going through the little hole right there.
Okay, so let's look at a couple of other machines now. I think somebody in the class had this machine that's Baby Lock Lauren, or maybe something similar, a slightly older model of a Baby Lock machine. And I found here in your instructions, this was on page 16 of the manual, it tells you what to do when you're using only 2 threads. Of course, when you're only using 2 threads, it means you're just using needle and lower looper. So here's the place where you learn to convert from 3 thread to 2 thread. And again, it tells you to take the thread out of your looper, and now you take this little wire hinge here. It looks like it's snapped on. I don't know where you would find it, but somewhere in your accessory box, you should be able to find this little wire. And you hook it in there and then swing it up. And when you swing it in, again, it comes through the back and fills up that little hole right there. And now over here, I have it on this is a Bernina 890. So this would be the newer, more top of the line Bernina sergers. And in this one, it's very similar to the Triumph. You have a little hinged piece that's attached to the looper. You swing it over. There's the pin that goes through. So it works the same concept on every serger, but your looper converter may look a little different. It may be a separate piece, or it may be something attached right there to the looper. So hopefully that gives everybody an idea of how to set up your machine for this flat lock stitch. And by the way, when you do a rolled hem next month, you may be doing a 2-thread rolled hem. I'm not sure which stitch Marcia is going to teach you, but if you have to do a rolled hem that only uses 2 threads, you'll have to do this again. You'll have to convert your upper looper. Now you know how to do it. Now you're experts. All right, once you get all your dials to the right number, or your stitch selector to the right number, and you've converted your looper over, your upper looper. And by the way, I forgot to mention, we did talk about this in class. The instructions for this say to have your cutting blade up and ready to cut. In this particular technique, we are not going to want to be cutting. So go ahead and turn off your cutting blade. For the baby lock, it means to put it in the down position. It means it goes down. For the Bernina, it's the opposite because your knife is up on top and you swing it down from the top. So your knife tells you to have your upper knife position down, and instead you want to swing it up. So the point is, have it so that your knife is not cutting your fabric. You don't want to cut your fabric. Sometimes you do in this stitch, but for the technique we're using, we do not want to be cutting. So make sure your blade isn't cutting the fabric. All right, so now we have satisfied the first two things. We've put our needle in the right place. We've set the settings and the hardware and gotten our machine set up. So the third and last step we need to do is take care of our threading. Where do your thread cones go? So that's the one that I showed you back here, at least on the baby lock. It looks like this, where it shows you which of these spools to put your thread on. If you're on the Bernina or other machines where you have dials here, you're probably going to put your needle right here and put it through that slot. And your lower looper is going to go through that slot. The point is, find out what it says for your machine. And I believe one of the machines in class had to use 3 threads to do this stitch. As I recall, we had some issues with that. That machine just was designed to only do a 3-thread flat lock. It could not do a flat lock with 2 threads. So you'll have to just look at your own machine and your own brand and see how it tells you, but you're looking for these words here, 2-thread flat lock narrow. That's the word you're looking for, and read your instructions and set up your machine exactly the way it says to, including where the threads go. We used a beautiful decorative thread in the lower looper, and I recommend, because some of this thread is bulky and it doesn't wrap real tightly and it can kind of all just come loose and pile in a puddle down here. So I recommend putting a thread net over, and that will keep it contained, and the thread just is going to just come out of here. You can even fold this thread net in half so that it's not so big, but it's just to keep the thread corralled so that it doesn't unwind too much and get knotted and tangled up on itself. And some of us had a hard time, depending on how thick your thread is, getting this thread to go through our lower looper threading. If you had an air threading machine, it might be too heavy for the air to blow it through. So in that case, we learned how to make a thread cradle, and it's very easy to do. Pull off about 30 inches of your regular thin serger thread, fold it in half, and it'll form a loop at this end, and you can clip the edges so that they're nice and blunt on the cut edge. And then this is the edge right here that you're going to feed through the machine. You're going to thread this through just like you were threading a single thread. And it should go through pretty easily. And if you have air threading, those 2 threads should blow through very quickly, just like they were 1 thread. On the other end, you're going to loop your heavy thread through. So once this end gets threaded and pulled through, you're just going to pull on it until it loops this thread. You're going to just feed this thread through in the loop. And once it's all done, you can cut it off and or take it off and use it for, throw it away or use it for another thread loop if you don't want to waste the thread. So that's how you make a thread cradle in case your thread is too thick. So now on the top of your pillow, which is the part that has the interfacing ironed to it, I want you to press a crease right along the center. You're going to use that as a guideline. And then once you have your center mark there, you're going to draw lines, parallel lines that are 45 degrees from that center. And so if you have this kind of a ruler, somewhere on your ruler, you should have a 45-degree mark, right? And so you can align the 45 degrees with your crease, and then your ruler should be slanted at exactly 45 degrees from your crease. If you don't have a ruler that has a 45-degree angle, well, all you have to do is just take the corner here, fold it down, and just fold into a triangle. So just let this edge come and meet this lower edge, and you can fold it right into a triangle, and you'll have 45 degrees exactly. And then after you draw your first one with your, of course, erasable marking pen, then you're going to use your ruler and you're just going to make parallel lines all the way across. I would suggest either 2 or 2.5 inches apart, or 2 1/4, or whatever you think looks nice. I believe on my pillow I did them at 2.5 inches, and it looked just fine. So draw those across, and then you're going to draw them in the other direction, and this time make sure they're exactly 90 degrees so you have perfect little squares there, and draw across the other way, and now you've got your whole piece marked up. Remember, once you have your marking on, don't ever go over and press this. If you press it, all your marking will disappear. So do all your pressing before you mark. So for this next part, we're getting ready to actually make our stitch. I recommend that you take some practice fabric before you put it on your actual pillow. Go ahead and practice making the stitch the way I'm going to teach you in just a moment, and see if your stitch is working out. See if it's threaded correctly. If your machine's set up correctly, you should be getting the correct stitch. And so practice first before you put it on your actual pillow. So here's how we make the stitch. We fold the fabric with wrong sides together. So I'm looking at the right side where I marked. Don't press it, just kind of mash it down with your fingers. Don't iron it. Now over here, when I put this under my machine, somewhere on your presser foot here, and this is just the regular presser foot that comes with any overlock machine, you should have marks along the top of your presser foot somewhere, and these marks correspond to where your needle position is. Here's where your right needle sews, here's where your left needle sews. Of course, this would be for a cover stitch if you have these 3 holes for needles, if you have cover stitch. Notice where I am placing the fabric. It's just at the right needle mark and maybe 1 or 2 hairs past it to the right. In other words, you do want your needle to penetrate right about here. And when you sew this stitch, it's going to look funny because you're going to have a whole lot of loose thread. The loops are all going to be forming right over here on the right off of the fabric. So it looks like it's sort of hanging on with a lot of mess over here. And that is actually correct. Don't worry, because once you pull it out and make the flat lock out of it, it's going to look beautiful. So align your edge like that and do it on your practice fabric. And try serging down there. So once you get a row sewn, you are going to take that fabric and actually pull apart. So you're going to pull that way, and this seam here is going to stretch out, and on the bottom it's going to look like the little rungs of a ladder. And on the top, it's going to form this beautiful stitch. So as you tug on it left and right and kind of wiggle back and forth as well, you'll see all your looper thread pull apart and fill up all that space. And you don't want to have a pleat or a ridge here. It should fold all the way flat. So you can see right here in this one, I still have a little bit of a tuck, a pleat. But right here, it's full, it's completely flat. That's what you want. So if you can't get it flat, wiggle it out a lot. If it just won't flatten out at all, it means that you had your fabric a little too far to the right. So in other words, your needle was maybe coming in over here and you didn't have enough loose thread hanging off to the side. It's this loose thread that ends up pulling out and forming this braid look. It looks like a piece of ribbon trim when you get it done correctly. So once you feel like you're doing the stitch well, go ahead and try it on the real pillow. And stitch down one seam of your pillow, wiggle it open, see if you can get the ladder rungs here on the back side, and see if it looks pretty on the front side. Okay, now this should make you happy because this is a really easy seam to remove. Since we didn't cut or do anything permanent to our pillow, it's really easy. If you don't like it for some reason, if you were crooked or whatever reason, all you have to do is just rip out those little rungs of the ladder with a seam ripper, and they rip out very easily. And then on the front, you should be able to just pull your looper thread all the way out. It should just pull out in one big swoop. So it's really very easy to take the stitches out if you're not happy. But I still recommend that you practice on some scrap fabric first, so that way you can make sure your machine is all set up correctly. So once you get all the parallel lines going one way, you're going to come back and do them the other way and form squares. I just recommend when you're sewing this section and you come over a hump from your previous decorative stitch, you're going to have to just help it, gently tug it and help it under the presser foot so that it doesn't get stopped up there. But don't pull too hard, because remember that this is on the bias and it's really going to stretch the fabric out if you pull. So only just help it through a little bit right at that point and then let it go, and don't stretch as you serge. And then this one, you're going to do the same thing. You're going to pull and wiggle so that all your little ladder rungs lay flat. And it's just going to look beautiful on the front. And then once you are happy with all this, you can go ahead and give it a nice press with the iron. Press it out and press the top, and it'll get rid of all your stray marks. And hopefully it will look pretty like this one. Now it's time to trim. We purposely made it bigger than it needed to be so that we had some room at the edges. And so now you want to find the visual center of the quilt so that your pillow looks even. So find either a cross hatch right here, or if this might be more the center, find the center of a square right there. That could be your center. But wherever you feel like is the visual center, from that point, you're going to measure out 7.5 inches from every direction. And then that's going to be your cutting line. And then you're going to cut a 15-inch piece with that point right there, right in the center of it. And then from the extra piece of fabric you have, you're going to cut the back the very same dimensions. I only recommend that you put decoration on the front. I don't think you need to put decoration on the back of the pillow. So that is as far as we got in class on Saturday. And so I recommend that you try to get to that point and then come back in March, and we're going to start right here on step 12. Assuming everybody has had success up to that point, we'll plan on starting on step 12 when we get to the March class. So if you feel confident and you want to go ahead and take yourself through the rest of the PowerPoint, then you certainly may, and I will talk you through it from this point on. But if this is as far as you get, you're right up with everybody else, and we'll come back and finish up in March. So the next step for step 12 is to set up as a 3-thread overlock wide. So let's just review the chart here. In order to do the wide stitch, we have to move our needle from the right position to the left position. Then you're going to follow the instructions. Set your length, set your width. You're either going to set your stitch selector to A, or you're going to set your 4 dials here, if you have them, to the 4 settings. It won't be 4 because you're only using 1 needle. So you'll have a left needle setting, you'll skip the right needle, it won't matter, and then you'll have a lower looper setting, an upper looper setting, and a lower looper setting. And when you are threading for this stitch, If you don't have air threading, if you manually thread your machine, you always want, well, I wouldn't say always, but most of the time the instructions tell you to start with the lower looper, the upper looper, inside here, the upper looper first, and then thread your lower looper. But always read your own machine instructions because there are exceptions. So each brand and each style of machine may be different, but read your instructions for that. So you're going to follow your setup here. Go ahead and put your blade back up so that it will cut. And there's the main one that we want to talk about. Subsidiary looper, this time we're going to take it out. So if you put a little wire in there, if you put a looper converter in there, then you want to take it out now. Flip it back over or take out the little wire or take out the little hat and put it away because you will be putting thread through there now because we have upper looper thread to use. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So for this step, you're going to use 3 cones of regular serger thread. And our fabric is kind of white with gray stitching in it, gray tones in it. So you could use white, you could use light gray, you could use a medium gray, or any combination of the 3. Even a combination is going to look just fine. So somebody in class was buying thread, and I was recommending, well, instead of buying 3 cones of white or 3 cones of gray, why don't you buy 1 cone of each? So she bought a white, a light gray, and a medium gray. And that way she has a variety of colors now to use at home, but she can use all 3 of them in one stitch because they blend together. And most of the time, the only stitch that will ever show is the needle stitch when you're doing this kind of a stitch. So your needle thread is the one you maybe want to match to your fabric the closest. The looper threads could be something that blends because they're just going to be seen underneath the garment or underneath the project. All right, at this time, if you have a cording foot, you want to go ahead and put that in. The cording foot has a groove underneath, and it's just perfect for zipper teeth to fit under. You'd also use it when you wanted to put on piping or other kind of cords, and that way the presser foot can accommodate the cord. The cord can snuggle up in that little groove, and the presser foot can still be flat as it surges. So if you have the cording foot, put it on. If you don't have a cording foot and you want to try this with the regular serger foot, I think you'll probably be okay. You'll just have to make sure that you are guiding your zipper and making sure your zipper stays under there as you serge. So with invisible zippers, they always come as closed, and so open them and then come to the iron and press out the little coil. So the zipper teeth right here will be rolled up onto the zipper, and you want to flatten them out this way and put the iron on them briefly so it makes them flat. And now you are going to come along one edge with, so you can see I have the right side of my pillow, and now I flipped my zipper over so that this is the wrong side of my zipper, so I have right sides together. And I'm going to align my zipper tape right along the edge of my pillow top. And make sure that you have about 2 extra inches sticking out here. That way you can come and you can put your presser foot right here and it won't be in the way of the zipper pull. It'll fit right from here to here. And then all you have to do is just start serging right along there. So the idea here is you've pressed and rolled out those zipper teeth this way. You're going to set your presser foot right here. Your needle, because we're doing a wide needle, that means your left needle is going to end up right about here. And it's going to sew right down there. You see, right along the edge near your zipper teeth. And this edge is going to get overlocked with your looper threads, and it's going to come out really neat and clean. And really, this is all you do. Just put it there, stitch straight across, and you have just put in half of an invisible zipper. Very easy to do. So here's mine lined up, and I don't know if you can see it, but right here is the little tunnel that's underneath my foot. And look how nicely it fits. It fits right under, right over on top of those zipper teeth. And so if you have the cording foot, you hardly even have to guide your fabric. It just stays right in that tunnel. Just make sure that this stays aligned with the edge of your pillow top. All right, but again, if you don't have the cording foot, just kind of squish it down on top of the zipper, but maybe hold and guide it a little bit more. And you're just going to stitch straight across along the entire edge. So now that you have one edge done, you're going to come and you're just going to put the other edge up and make sure again that your right sides together. So the right side of your fabric goes against the right side of your zipper. And so here's how it kind of looks when you get it sewn on. You're going to do the same thing to the other side of the zipper. Now here's a little option I like to do. What I like to do is I like to come back just with a regular sewing machine, and you could do this at the very end, but you don't even have to do it. But if you want to, and I will show you in class in March when you come for class how I do it. But I like to just go ahead and sew about 1.5 inches from the edge of the fabric or from my zipper to the edge of the fabric. It just makes a little cleaner edge. And what it means is the zipper isn't going to open all the way to the edge. The zipper is going to open to about there. And I'll show you in class how I just think it looks a little bit more professional. It's how pillows come usually when you purchase them at a store. At this point, you're going to open your zipper halfway because we're going to go ahead and sew around all the other 3 sides of the pillowcase. And what you could actually do if you want is you can close your zipper and you can sew the right side and the left side, then open your zipper and come back and sew the bottom. And that way you won't, if you don't open your zipper at some point, you'll end up sewing yourself into a complete square and you won't have any place to turn inside out. So for this one, we're again going to use the same stitch, the 3-thread overlock wide, and it's going to end up making about a 1/2 inch seam allowance all the way around the remaining 3 edges of your pillow. And then you're just going to reach in through your open zipper and you're going to pull it inside out. And there is a way, if you don't want the corners to be quite so pointy, you can miter them a little bit with a regular sewing machine, and that's just an option that again I will show you in class. And then after that, you are ready to make your tassels and sew your tassels to the corners of your pillow. And how cool is that? So the tassels we will be learning to make the tassels in March. And in the meantime, your pillow will look just beautiful. Now, let me just tell you one other option for those of you, if you find out that your machine never could make the nice flat lock decoration. Maybe your machine just doesn't make that stitch. It's possible. Not every machine makes every stitch. If you want to just go ahead and sew up a plain pillow, you'll still be able to learn how to put the zipper in and how to do the 3-thread overlock on the 4 sides of your pillow. And you can still put tassels in. So, and you can always put a little decoration. You can always sew on a little embroidered decoration or something in the middle. So if you are frustrated getting these stitches to work, just practice making a plain white pillow and you'll still learn quite a few serger skills. So I hope that helps you review some things we learned at the last class. I hope that takes some of the pressure off so you don't feel like you're behind or that this class just isn't for you. I want to make sure everybody has success. Everybody who came has a serger that can do something like this. And so I want you all to feel like you have command over your serger and you know what you're doing. And by the time the year is out and we've changed into many different types of stitches, it's just going to be secondhand knowledge. You're going to know exactly how to change those loopers every time, exactly how to change your needles. You're going to understand the mechanics. It's really not difficult. So hang in there. We will see you in February to do a rolled stitch, and then I'll see you again in March and we'll finish up our pillow. Thank you all so much.